Hi everybody, it's Martin here with more practical down-to-earth teachings on mediumship without the fluff. So in today's video I want to talk about how to manage emotions in mediumship, and this is a common area I'm asked about. Many people ask me, how do I keep my own emotions out of it? Other people ask me, what do I do if the sitter or the recipient gets upset? How can I manage it? So these are some of the areas that I want to talk about in today's video. So let's get into it. So emotions are a totally natural part of mediumship. It's perfectly natural that when we're doing mediumship, emotions will surface within the room. Whether that's emotions coming from the spirit world, emotions with the sitter or the recipient, or emotions that come up within us ourselves. It's perfectly natural, and we should never seek to suppress that emotion. But the key thing is we need to learn to manage that emotion. And as mediums, we learn to develop our sensitivity. We learn to make ourselves more sensitive. And of course, that makes us more sensitive to emotions. That means that sometimes our own emotions can creep in. And some people are more affected by that than others. But learning to manage those emotions is an essential part of the development process. Just like we learn to blend with spirit, we learn to look for evidence. We need to learn the process of managing emotions so that they're not an obstacle or barrier to mediumship. And I believe this is one area that does not receive enough focus, hence this video today. So I'm now going to give you 7 tips for how to manage emotions. So tip number 1, we need to create a safe space. What we have to do is create a safe space for emotions to be expressed from all parties. We need to create that safe space for emotions to be expressed, whatever those emotions, whether they're from spirit, whether they're from the sitter. We need a space that is comfortable and secure for that to happen. We need to give space for healing to take place, because healing is a vital component of mediumship, and whenever mediumship takes place, healing is inherent and integral within it. We ourselves can bring qualities to that space to help create the conditions we need. We can be compassionate, understanding, and bring love, because love is the foundation for mediumship. We can be open-minded and tolerant and non-judgmental. No matter what comes forward from the spirit world, no matter who comes forward, we shouldn't judge them. No matter what comes up within the sitting, we shouldn't form strong opinions or judgments about them. We should just be the witness. We create the communication, we allow it to flow, and we are the witness to it. We don't interfere, we don't superimpose our own opinions, we just let it unfold naturally. So number 2, we need to remain emotionally neutral. We are the messenger. Our job is to create and give that communication from spirit. Our job is to be a clear channel for that communication to take place. The communication should not be affected or coloured by our own emotion. So we need to stay out of the emotion. We need to keep our own emotions out of it. And that is easier said than done for most. In the early stages of development, it's common for your own emotions to surface when you're doing mediumship. But with practice and experience, we can learn to keep our emotions out of it. And I'll talk about how to do that in a moment. So number 3, we need to identify the source of emotion. If we're experiencing emotion, we need to recognize, where is it coming from? Whose emotion is it? Because we need to know that to be able to manage it. We need to know that to be able to deal with it. Is it the spirit communicators' emotions? Are they bringing through emotions that are part of the evidence, that are part of their story? Is the emotion the spirit communicator is bringing part of the message, part of the communication for their loved one in front of them? So is it your emotion? And if it is your emotion, what is creating your emotion? Is it an emotional reaction of yours to the recipient or the audience? If the recipient is being touched by what has been said and is becoming very tearful and emotional, the emotions from the recipient may trigger those emotions within us too. That commonly happens, especially in those early stages. Sometimes the emotions that come forward from spirit can trigger emotions within us. Sometimes when spirit brings forward a very profound feeling of love, that can trigger emotions within us as well. Sometimes the emotions from the scenario can trigger emotions within us. So say, for example, you have a young child who passed in a tragic accident or in a tragic circumstances, or you just have somebody maybe who took their own life in a tragic way. That can bring up within us strong emotions, which can be difficult to deal with. So we need to recognize that. We can also have emotions that get triggered within us from our own unresolved issues. Say you had a bad relationship with your father, with a lot of things that were not resolved, creating a lot of emotional problems for you that are repressed, but you haven't totally dealt with them. Then you get somebody from spirit who coming through from the daughter who is a father they had a very similar relationship to yours. And what it does is it triggers that repressed, unresolved issues within you, and those repressed emotions can surface. So we need to recognize that. We need to deal with our own stuff to prevent that. So identifying the source of emotion is critical because it determines how we manage it. If you're finding this video helpful so far, then do hit the like button and do leave me a comment at the end to let me know how much you enjoyed it. Also, if you enjoy my teaching style, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified of all of my videos. So let's look now at how we manage emotions. So number 4, managing emotions from the spirit communicator. We need to recognize that those emotions that spirit bring forward are vital. They're very important. They need to be expressed as part of the mediumship. Do not try and ever suppress them. They have to come through. They're meant to come through. For healing to take place, it's a vital part of the communication. But recognize first and foremost, they are not your emotions. They are the emotions of spirit. So our job is to give the emotion, to express it, the emotion, to let it be expressed, allow it to be expressed. And once it has been expressed, generally it will go. They bring the emotion for us to give it. And once we've given it, the next thing comes forward. The emotion disappears. Now, if the emotion we're getting is too intense, we can send our thoughts to spirit to turn down the intensity of it, to turn down the dial, to turn down the volume, to make it less strong because it's affecting us too much. We can send those thoughts to the spirit communicator and send those thoughts to your guides and helpers who help to facilitate the process. And they will help to turn down the intensity. They will help to back it off a little. And we also need to understand the difference between emotions in the message and emotions that are part of the evidence. We need to understand that sometimes emotions are evidential, sometimes emotions are the message. What I mean by that is spirit will bring forward emotions that are part of their story, that are part of their life here, that are part of their relationship with the recipient. But that's not how they feel now. They're bringing it forward as evidence. So say that they got angry, say they were irritable, say they were always shouting and moaning at people. That's evidence. They're not going to be bringing that from the spirit world now. So negative emotions are always evidence, whether that's anger, irritation, sadness, depression, etc. All those emotions are always part of the story. It's always evidential. But when we come to the message, that is always positive emotion. I've never come across a message yet that is negative emotion. And I believe it's not allowed to happen because the unwritten law is that for someone to come forward and connect through a medium, then they have to come through to create healing, to create positivity. They cannot bring through a message that is negative. That's not allowed. I've seen some mediums get the emotions that are part of the evidence and fail to recognize it's part of the evidence and try and give it as a message, and that's wrong. I've seen many mediums who make mistakes by getting negative emotions that were part of the story and then saying, oh, anger, I'm getting this anger. They're angry with you. Or I'm getting this irritation. They don't like you. You irritate them. And that's not right. No, that's not the message at all. That's part of the evidence. So we need to understand that negative emotions is evidential. Positive emotions is message. But of course you can get positive emotions as part of the evidence as well. The point being is that if it's negative emotion, it's not the message. That's the key point I want to get across to you. So number 5, managing the emotions of the sitter or the recipient. We've got to recognize that sitters will get emotional. Mediumship is healing. It will provoke an emotional response within those who've lost their loved ones, who are reunited with them. Of course it's going to bring forward emotion. So we should always have a box of tissues on hand. Always. So we have to recognize that emotion is part of the healing process. Emotion is natural. And there's varying degrees of emotion we'll see with our recipients. From slight emotion with some happy tears through to very distressed tears can come through as well. So there's a whole range of emotion that comes through. Now, one of the things we should learn to do as well is to allow the sitter to be with their emotion, not to save them from it, not to try and stop that emotion instantly, but to give them the space they need for that emotion. We shouldn't try and save them by rushing round and putting our arm around them and saying, there, it's not so bad. No, that's not the job of the medium. The job of the medium is to create communication to allow healing to take place. We're not there to save them. It's important to recognise that. So you need to allow the sitter to be with their emotions. But if the sitter is becoming highly emotional or distressed, then we should ask, is it okay for us to continue? They might need a little bit of space to get themselves together before we continue. Or it may just be so painful or traumatic for them that they just ask us to stop. And if they ask us to stop, we have to acknowledge that and stop. We need to do it. We must. But in most cases, 99% of cases, most sitters are happy for us to continue with the communication. So if it's causing distressing emotion for the recipient, there's many tools and techniques we can use to move away from it. First of all, the obvious one is to go to something different, to move on to the next stage of what needs to come through. Not to stay with it, not to prolong it any longer. We've given it, we've got it across, move on. A technique taught by Doris Stokes is to flip the energy. It's called flipping the energy. We move from something sad to something happy, something positive, something to lift their energy. So they're bringing through their passing, it's sad, we know it's sad, it's creating a response, but then we move to happy memories, positive memories, and we can ask spirit to bring it and they will bring it. So we flick it from sad to happy. So that is a technique we can use to help manage the emotion. Now I know some mediums and tutors who say that it's not a good demonstration of mediumship in front of an audience unless you make at least one of them cry. And for me, that's very unprofessional, and for me that's a crazy idea, crazy teaching. I've seen some mediums who've been taught that who will then go out of their way to make somebody cry, who will then keep milking something sad to make someone cry, or then keep banging on about something that's very traumatic to provoke an emotional response. And that's not right, that's not appropriate. So you must never force emotion from the sitter or the recipient. You must never make the recipient cry. That's not your job. Your job is to bring through what comes through naturally and allow it to be expressed. But worst of all, you must never milk something painful or traumatic purely to create tears in the recipient, purely to create that emotional response. For me, I'm afraid that's abuse, and I hate to see it, and it should not be practiced, absolutely not. So I do not subscribe to this idea about getting emotion during a demonstration, making it good. If anybody is tearful during a demonstration and it happens naturally, fine. But we never seek to create it. If I do a demonstration and nobody gets emotional, that's equally wonderful as well. It does not matter. My job is to bring forward from spirit what needs to be expressed. If you are enjoying this video and getting lots from it, then I do have a 2-hour teaching video on emotions in mediumship, which does go into the topic in much more detail. It's available from my store, it costs £12, and I'll put a link to it in the comments and description below. So number 6, managing your own emotions. As a medium, you've got to be emotionally neutral. We've got to be that clear channel for spirit. We cannot allow our emotions to interfere with the communication. We cannot let our own emotions affect our work or stop us working, because that is unprofessional. I've seen some mediums who become so emotional they have to stop working on platform, and that's wrong. We should never allow that. It's unprofessional. To become emotional really as a medium is unprofessional. It will happen, it will creep in, I know that, but we need to learn to manage it. So we need to be like the emergency services or doctors and nurses in hospitals who deal with situations that provoke emotion on a daily basis, but they learn to distance themselves and stay out of the emotion. So how do we manage our own emotions? And this is a part of the training of mediumship. We have to recognize when we're becoming emotional. We have to recognize when those feelings are rising, that this is our emotion. And when we get that, the technique we use is to step out of the emotion, to step to the side, to distance ourselves from the emotion, to detach from the emotion. We call it dissociation. We're removing ourselves out of the energy of the emotion. We're moving to the side of that so that it does not affect us. If you're feeling profound emotion coming from the spirit world, you just step to the side. If you feel your own emotions rising, you move back from it. We become the viewer of it, we become the observer, as if it's somebody else's emotions, not our own. So we can do that. So that way we're not connected to the emotion, that way the emotion won't get the better of us. We're aware of the emotion, but we don't need to express it, we don't need to be connected with it. We can learn to practice this as we go through our mediumship and our training, and it gets easier with practice. By the time we go on platform, or by the time we're doing professional sittings, we should have learned to deal with that. It's important to do that. So number 7, we need to sort our own stuff. The golden rule is we have to be a clear channel to allow whatever needs to take place to take place. We can't have our own issues surfacing and interfering with the process. We can't have our own unresolved trauma or our own unresolved emotions surfacing and getting in the way. If you had a bad relationship with your father and that starts to surface within a communication and it triggers emotions within you, then you've not dealt with it, you've not addressed it, you've not resolved it. So we need to identify any unresolved emotions or unresolved trauma within ourselves, and we need to work through it. If that needs professional counselling or therapy, then we should get that to deal with it so that we are that clear channel. I myself, I trained as a hypnotherapist, and before we were allowed to go and work on the general public doing therapy on them, we had to go through our own therapy. We had to have therapy for all our own issues so that nothing comes forward within a session with a client that triggers issues within us. And it's exactly the same with mediumship. Medium, heal thyself, become that clear channel for spirit. So that is how to manage emotions in mediumship. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, hit the like button, do leave me a comment and let me know. I'll look forward to seeing you all again in the next one.